I'm Christine Gadsby. I am from Dallas, Texas, here with my boss, who's going to speak after me, Adam Boulton. I did not ride in on horseback, and I did take an airplane. And we're here to talk a little bit about maintaining cybersecurity in the software supply chain, which of course is challenging, very challenging for BlackBerry indeed. And while we don't have all the answers, we definitely came here today to just share a little bit of some of the pain points we've had over the last few years, and to look at how BlackBerry is involved in some of these processes, and especially the costs and challenges of engineering practices. First off and foremost, this is a really important slide because while you may know BlackBerry as a handset maker, this is what we've been doing for the last 2 years, and this is kind of a picture of our reality. We've acquired every company on this screen except for going into Android, which going into Android on the handset, you're all familiar with Android, it's pretty much a patching nightmare. So this has been pretty much the pain points that we've had in securing all of these products over the last couple of years. And what this slide adds up to is kind of the massive security engineering challenge that we have in the global connected software supply chain. We're going to pick on QNX a little bit and the automotive market because, you know, while there are challenges across a lot of domains, I think we face one of our bigger challenges is definitely QNX. And I'm going to just pinpoint on one small part of this, which is my best friend, open source software. As you probably all know me, if you've seen me speak before, I do a lot of speaking on the most obvious offender out of everything. Here, to get us started, this is some really unique facts about BlackBerry, and one of the teams that I manage is our incident response team. So they're basically responsible to maintain the product security posture in market of all those products we saw that BlackBerry owns on that 2 screens ago. Within all of those products, there are 563 unique libraries tracked across 86 product variants. One single product could have 195 unique open source libraries. A product could contain 47 copies of the same library, and that was a huge one. When we started managing, really having a centralized source of managing open source software, I did this a lot. 47 copies, really, you guys are killing me. So, and up to 16 different versions of a unique library in one product. So as you can imagine, all of that velocity of open source vulnerabilities is a huge task to manage. So I want to take a little bit of time though and kind of take a step back, and some of this for people in the room might be completely, you know, this is easy stuff, Christine, but I think implementing things like this takes a really simple step back at how do you maintain patching when you're a spot in the cybersecurity supply chain or you're feeding to somebody else as a third party, whether you're connected to a device or not. We took all those. For every single, I'm going to back up just a second here, for every single one of these products as we came in, we really needed a centralized model to sort of get a baseline at what they already were so that we could kind of bring them up to the same standard. So that's what led to our team's development of this really simple model. For every product, we asked the initial question of where are you at now? So casual chaos is doing nothing. This is my favorite. CVE 2016 0024 hits, and you know, some senior member of some team at BlackBerry calls and says, you know, does this affect X product? You don't know. You know, it's kind of headless chicken, you don't answer the phone, whatever. The first step in maturity here is really building an incident response capability or team, whether it's a centralized model or you're simply just pinpointing one person that can be in charge of answering those questions. So, you know, maybe they're just getting into proactively watching for libraries that are known offenders, OpenSSL or whatever. You're at least recognizing that you need the functionality. That's kind of huge. And then 3, and I'll cover this kind of really quickly. If anybody has questions on this, I'm an open book and happy to answer them. Mastering operations. So this is a big one. So you have a disclosure policy. It's posted publicly. Security researchers know where to go so that they know where to tell you when they find something. You're watching for vulnerabilities proactively. You're paying attention to OpenSSL drops. You know, you're starting to work more with dev, and dev doesn't hate you for coming to them and telling you that you have to fix this because it's critical. You've now realized that security function, dev shouldn't be in charge of that. Maybe you need a separate function to understand all those open source vulnerabilities. So kind of really looking at managing open source and vulnerabilities in general through your supply chain is your responsibility, and you've agreed that you have to invest in it, and it's going to take time. Level 4 is tooling and automation. BlackBerry is super, super, super lucky, and I'm so glad we did this many years ago, but we've developed a lot of tools in-house that automate a lot of this. So, you know, you've built that bill of materials for every single one of your products. You've integrated that and collated it into one master open source and third-party catalog, so you can look across your entire company's portfolio and you can say, you can make that first slide is basically what level 4 is. You can tell that you have 563 libraries. You can tell that you have 47 versions of OpenSSL. So that when something like Heartbleed hits, you can look and you can say, I have that in 16 places. I need to go call 16 product managers and get them to fix it. So it's having that capability. Getting to the top at level 5, and you can see the risk goes up as the cost goes up. Level 5 is really where that investment comes. So you're taking all of that knowledge and you're putting it back into your product development. You're making smarter products, knowing that you need to make smarter open source decisions. And that is the same for third-party libraries. This can actually go up at this level into anything you're developing your products with. So really quickly, because I don't want to take time away from Adam, from an operational standpoint, which is my team is all in operations, here's some just super quick wins. We could spend a whole talk and a whole hour actually talking about practical advice for ops in open source. But here are just some really quick ones. I covered that, build a product material, bill of materials, and aggregate that. Integrate it across all of your products. Know exactly where everything is. Track vulnerabilities daily. It is absolutely not enough to scan a bill of materials, get that laundry list of CVEs you need to patch, and then do that once a year. Because the rest of the year, they're coming in daily, so have that done daily. Evaluate the open source you're using. Blacklist stuff. Limit the use of open source. And we talked about you need a cert function. You also need a security or a software readiness review. So one of the unique things BlackBerry has is a readiness review. All software is reviewed for vulnerabilities before it leaves the building. Adam's actually the gatekeeper for that. If I see something in a build I don't like, Adam gets a note from me and he goes and reviews why. So if a team has come to you and said, hey, we can't fix this moderate because it breaks functionality, your senior leadership team should probably know about that because that's risk they are accepting. Don't let dev police themselves. It will always come down to security features and product features over fixes. It will always come down to that. That is a challenge that we've faced over the years and why I'm one of the most hated people. I say that, but it's a love-hate relationship. But my friend Mike Amati from Synopsys has this saying, and I took it from him, and one of these days we'll be in the same room when I say it. Features are like vanilla ice cream. Everybody loves vanilla ice cream, and security fixes are like wheatgrass smoothies. Everybody knows you need the smoothie, but nobody's going to take it over the ice cream. So I use that a lot when I'm going back to product managers to tell them they can't ship that product unless they fix that. One more on the security engineering side. From an ops perspective, these are some more quick wins. This isn't deeply technical. This is simply just straight advice. Secure design principles. Understand the scope of the open source that's required at the design phase, and know how to best maintain its security. Just plan for it. You know you're going to use it, make a plan for it. The design using least privilege, sandboxing. Know what your open or your alternative libraries are in case one falls flat. If you're using libtiff, you should probably know what the alternative font rendering engines are because you're going to probably need them. Reduce risk with compiler defenses by reducing chances of exploitability. And then again, plan for that OSS maintenance. Maintenance releases, version updates, things like that, all that quality control, you should make a plan for that. And then hold your supply chain accountable. This is a really interesting thing that I talk to a lot of in the IoT space, companies that have other companies contributing to their code base, but then there's no policy in place for what kind of open source they're using. So know what your supply chain looks like. And then liability defense for those that don't comply. Make sure you've got something written to that contract that you can hold others accountable if they don't comply to their, I will limit my open source to 20% or whatever. And then do periodic checks for compliance. That's a big one. Don't just take their word for it. Trust but verify. And the bottom line is understand the total cost of ownership because free software is not free. And lastly, for me, and then I'm going to give it over to Adam, this is what BlackBerry spends to securely maintain these 3 libraries. These are some really big numbers. So the big one for me is OpenSSL. We spend over $370,000 a year maintaining OpenSSL at BlackBerry. That's huge. So, it's again, total cost of ownership and understand that, and then staff accordingly. And with that, I will hand it over to my friend Adam here to take it away from here.
Okay, so we take a bit of a segue here as we go into automotive. Now, for some of you who aren't familiar with the previous BlackBerry acquisitions, you might be wondering why a BlackBerry talking about automotive. Well, we acquired QNX back in 2010, and of course they were market leaders in automotive. They have a real-time operating system which you've probably used on a daily basis. It runs critical national infrastructure, runs traffic lights, it's in medical devices. It's pretty much everywhere when it comes to mission critical. And they're interesting numbers. When I first saw this with 60 million cars, it doesn't seem like a lot given all the vehicles that are of course on the planet, but you know, we're talking about high-end modern vehicles. The QNX operating system that is deployed in these cars, and of course then for the mobile handsets. So back in 2010, we used QNX, this mission critical software, to bring out BlackBerry 10, which came out a couple of years after that. And you know, that's been an interesting relationship, because for those who think about QNX, who are familiar with it, I've spoken to people in the past and they thought QNX was a security company and building secure solution. I have a different view on that. I saw them as a safety company. They produce safety critical systems. And certainly when we purchased them and worked with them, we knew they were lacking in the security critical area, which is what BlackBerry specialized in before the acquisition. So to bring these two domains together has been a very interesting kind of art to actually understand what these two domains look like, how they overlap, and where the conflicts are. And I'll go into some of that detail as we look at some solution. So specifically with automotive, similar to the general embedded slide, these are the OEMs. There's over 40 OEMs where you find QNX, hundreds of vehicle platforms, of course in the 60 million vehicles. And these are the ones that where we provide product to, but also our security services. So these are professional service engagements to work on security and safety engineering. And when we think about the automotive space, there was something very interesting that came, a survey that came out from the Ponemon Institute. This just runs through some of these figures. And one in particular was quite alarming actually when I saw this survey. And some quite surprising. So we've got 57% doubt that automotive software development teams have the skills to combat software security threats. 90% think it's challenging. 55% lack the training. And in this last one, was something that I found particularly kind of concerning. 51% consider security an add-on feature. Why is that particularly concerning? Well, we all know where security engineering starts. Of course, it's secure by design, it's architecture and design engagements, and not looking at just implementation add-ons. And it was kind of interesting, part of this survey coming from the automotive industry, from the engineers and the consumers. And the reason why I found it was interesting from the engineers was because they actually do a lot of security engineering without realizing it. The safety engineering side, building safety critical systems, there's a huge overlap in the way that you actually build this assurance when we think about the secure design principles of isolation, when we think about temporal separation, and we'll go into more detail on this, but they've actually been building secure solution in kind of many regards. It's just not thinking about the likes of, say, confidentiality or authentication and access controls, but integrity and availability. These guys really have it locked down. In fact, it's extremely impressive when you look at some of these safety critical systems and the assurance that they bring to those domains. The consumer confidence, given the media coverage, that's not particularly surprising. Although many of these cases have been buried, the likes of Toyota are now 1.6 billion in terms of settled lawsuits. There's been many cases, if you're not familiar with the Bookout lawsuit, which was to do with the unintended acceleration in the electronic throttle control system, which led to fatalities. This was in relation to memory corruption. I was chatting to some guys from the automotive industry today, There was no pinpoint in terms of the root cause analysis, but what it showed was a systematic failing of Toyota's ability to create safe and secure systems. We're talking about violations with the having single point of failures in the electronic throttle control system. We're talking about hundreds, thousands of violations against the likes of MISRA C. Obviously, MISRA, and I'll talk about that in detail, isn't a requirement of the automotive industry. But Toyota were just branded as spaghetti code, almost a gross negligence to building this system that led to fatalities. If you're not familiar with the case, it was two females in the vehicle. The throttle was stuck, so there was unintended acceleration as fast as the vehicle could go. They applied the handbrake. Of course, the throttle was still stuck, 160-foot skid mark, which led to their fatalities. And a lot of this was pointed at software errors and memory corruption. And then, of course, the recent case you may have heard here in the UK, 24th of November, with Skoda. Almost an identical case on the M40. An 8-minute phone call to 999 actually led to someone becoming decapitated in a vehicle. It was a collision at 117 miles an hour at 3 a.m. And on the phone call, what has been now in the media, this guy's vehicle, unintended acceleration, cruise control was stuck. It was a stop-start technology, so couldn't turn the keyless system off because this is software, this is ECUs, this is CAN bus. He didn't apply the handbrake, wasn't sure what to do. And during the 999 call, he was asked if he should apply the handbrake, which, let's all think about that, applying a handbrake at 117 miles an hour. And that was the last time the operator spoke to the chap before, the unfortunate incident. She went to check if he could apply the handbrake. By that point, he'd already collided with, I think it was a 20-ton truck. And there was someone parked in that truck at the time and was actually thrown from their cabin. Bearing in mind he collided at 170 miles an hour. A lot of the black box data has been lost because of the collision. They're saying that there's 5 seconds worth of data from the airbag system. But what's particularly concerning about that and what we've seen with the Toyota case is that why are you trusting this data? There's been flaws in this data before. If these vehicles can exist in this state where the safety and security critical system is not giving you assurance, why rely on that data? Toyota have had auditing problems before with their black box data, so why rely on this? Are we ever going to get to the root cause analysis? So you can really understand it from the perspective of the consumer. And what this slide really means, I think, to sum it up, everyone knows it is difficult, but I don't think the safety engineers realise how much security work they've actually been doing. And more than half are doubting the ability to build such systems. And the others, it's almost like they don't know where to start. And it's no wonder. This is a very simplified overview of automotive attack vectors. Many, we've seen many published attacks on these components. But what I would say, I think the automotive industry gets a very hard time. They are incredibly innovative. They build very, very complex systems. Remember, these guys are thinking about safety and security critical systems. So when we think about IoT, these guys kind of really top the complexity of building these systems. And we look at some of these components here. So I don't know, pick on the keyless system. We've seen that with Volkswagen recently. Compromise all the cryptographic issues they've had with their locking mechanisms. Wi-Fi being attacked through the vehicles, the proof of concepts through infecting ICUs, the information control units, through CD players. And this doesn't even include all the V2X, so vehicle to anything standards. In fact, Joe was kind of covering all the radio area networks. This is where the V2X stuff is going, for vehicles to talk intelligently. V2V, so vehicle-to-vehicle communication, reducing collisions, vehicle to infrastructure to help create smart cities, help create more intelligent vehicles and create autonomous vehicles. And the V2V stuff half of this stuff isn't even worked out. There's a whole lot of other standards that are to come to industry. The attack surface just keeps growing. And there was an interesting law. I think it's called Goldberg's law, and you look at the automotive industry, and it kind of goes like you spend so long wondering if you can actually achieve this stuff. You've never really asked if you should be doing it. And you look at some of the things that have been done. I mean, the iKettle and remote toasters and some of the technology with IoT in general. A lot of it is ringing true in automotive. Do you really need Wi-Fi networks inside the vehicle? What are we really doing with this point of innovation? It's just pack more and more in. There's more consumer demand. Keeps increasing the attack surface. And the challenges are just vast. So going back to the other slide, it was a huge attack surface. And then the standards and legislation. So security engineering is playing that huge catch-up compared to safety. There's all kinds of standards. I've got some listed on the next couple of slides that I'll come up against. And legislation. There's new legislation coming in with the Spy Car Act. If you haven't heard of the Spy Car Act, I really recommend to check that out. It should be one of the first legislations that's in relation to security and holding OEMs, automotive OEMs, accountable for the security of those vehicles and fines and enforcing the likes of penetration testing. And the automotive industry having to deal with legacy technology, with the control area network, moving all the messages around the vehicle. There's been lots of issues, of course, with CAN. It was designed back by Robert Bosch in the 1980s. It was, of course, never designed with security in mind. And the reason I put this comment here, which we should be grateful for, is because it's simple. It's kind of brilliant in many ways from a reliability engineering perspective. I have never seen, and if anyone has, I'd love to know, I've never seen any issues that have come about, so any impact from a safety critical system because of the failure of CAN. So you don't have segregation really in CAN. There's kind of CAN gateways which are coming up, and CAN is kind of being reinvented. But you're taking a technology that's over 30 years old, and people are wondering why we have issues with automotive because that separation wasn't there. But from a reliability engineering perspective, CAN is incredible. And the challenges kind of keep going on. So we've got the security critical systems, which is really most of my background. And from the likes of Blackberry and dealing with devices, our biggest trade-off was usability. How can we still use this system? What do the functional requirements look like? How do the non-functional requirements become involved? What we didn't tend to deal with was performance. I'm sure many of you have booted up a Blackberry and you see it takes a minute to load. It's going through the secure boot. I know everybody hates it, but that's because of the security just versus the usability. It wasn't so much a concern on the performance. It was kind of acceptable that, we can take a minute to boot this device because we're offering different types of assurance. This isn't a safety critical system. You don't get away with that in safety critical systems. You look at putting the likes of secure boot on a vehicle. It would be great to take a very thorough, very well-developed secure boot and give the integrity to the vehicle. You don't want to boot up a vehicle that takes a minute. You're not even allowed to do that. ICUs have to be up in 2 seconds. And now we've got to build security now. We've got to add more complexity. We've got to add more processing. But you can't just throw more chips and memory in a car because it's so well-tuned. It's a huge, huge engineering challenge to deal with. And I think one of the key points on here is that how security and the safety critical systems do share a lot. They're not orthogonal concerns. And this is really thinking about the design principles. So economy of mechanism, it's a security engineering term. You may know it as KISS, keeping it simple, keeping the separation there, so the isolation and the reliability. And the big one, really I'd say probably more so for safety, is redundancy. You need to have the redundancy in there to remove the single point of failure. But if you start to remove single points of failure, then and then adding the redundancy in to give the higher assurance, then what you're effectively doing is adding more complexity and more cost. But in theory, it should be safer because now we have kind of more fail-safes in place and we can maintain the integrity of that vehicle. which kind of isn't in favor of security so much because of the economy of mechanism. So you can see how there's kind of conflict between the two, combined with the usability and with the performance. And one area I've come up against with safety critical, and if anyone knows an answer to this, I'd love to know. I've seen people trying to apply CVSS, thanks, common vulnerability scoring systems to safety critical systems. I don't think it works. So you take the likes of the impact of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We use that in security critical systems. Confidentiality, availability, and integrity in safety critical systems, very, very different things. Because the impacts are different. That's what separates these two types of systems. Availability against a SQL database compared to availability of a break-in system, very different levels of impact, which is what the key separation is between the two. So how you would classify vulnerability in safety critical systems, I've not seen a CVSS equivalent, but if anyone knows, I'd love to see that and learn more about it. Just go quickly through, this isn't really a sales point on QNX, really making you aware of the engineering challenges. So I'll just pick on the temporal separation and kind of demonstrating the overlap between security and safety again. So in safety critical systems, you have watchdogs, which are really trying to maintain that integrity and availability of the platform, checking that things are in the right state, things aren't hogging as much resources. And we do that from a QNX kind of security feature side as well. And referring back to the Bookout case, the Bookout lawsuit against Toyota, you should see their watchdog implementation. I mean, just the design and architecture alone, it was clearly very broken. It was an interrupt-driven watchdog, which seems to remove the point of having a watchdog. So I'd recommend actually checking that out. It's quite interesting how they've designed and architected it, and there were major failings, of course, in the watchdog. There are a couple I wanted to pick on here, but I'll just pick the rootless operation. We're talking about integrity of devices. Now, this is something we spent so much time on to get this right. We're talking about secure boot. We're talking about the ability for the operating system to continually check and perform integrity. Now, the Blackberry Priv, the Android device, of course, has secure boot on, has prevents actually rooting the device, has all kinds of capability in there. And this is a big one, really, to get right for the vehicles. We're talking about maintaining the integrity of the vehicles. And the Blackberry Priv is the only Android device that's actually been out which hasn't been rooted. Like I say, we spent a lot of time working this out, and I believe this is very important for safety critical systems, particularly automotive. You really don't want people messing with the integrity of these systems. They're very well tuned. Engine remapping is quite a scary concept. Messing with ECUs, very scary concept. I think customization can be offered to vehicles, but it needs to be very, very well managed. You do see a lot of people messing around with the integrity of the software of these systems. You think how much work goes in to keep it safe. These are not something that you really want people actually messing with or actually encourage them to do so. Just in the interest of time, I'll just skip to this slide. Some of the practical approaches, because I do want to offer some kind of solution and advice. Now, from a security engineering standpoint, of people not knowing where to get started, I recommend go to the safety industry. Read the likes of DO 178B. These are security guidelines actually for aviation. This came out in '92. And you actually read these design principles, you can actually just use them for security engineering. The concepts actually work. We're talking about the integrity and the availability of the platform. This stuff actually overlaps. J3061 is a new one for automotive cybersecurity. It's a framework. However, if you read that framework, you can apply that to IoT devices. There's nothing specific in there about automotive. The concepts can be blended. But going back through other ones, 26262, a great one, safety functional requirements, and these have been worked out many years ago. So people talk about the maturity of the security industry. This stuff's actually been worked out. This is a great way to go. MISRA C, I'm a huge fan of MISRA. and that stands for the Motor Industry Software Reliability Association. These are C language guidelines and rules for safe implementation of C and the C++ as well. But if you read that, it has nothing to do with the motor industry. There's nothing specific in there about automotive. If you want to do secure implementation of C and secure coding guidelines for IoT, for even native binaries, go for MISRA. And it's been around for 20 years now. And the last one to just show, because of tying this back into supply chain, how do you get continuous assessment? I just wanted to share something behind the scenes, a system that we call Jarvis. We've had this for years. It's something which I personally build and love. It's about binary static analysis, understanding the security posture of any component, whether it's an ECU, whether it's a Windows binary, whether it's a Java application, whether it's an APK. We have over 400 dashboards showing the real-time analysis of a binary. What's the security posture look like? What comparted defenses does it have in? How clean is the code and cyclomatic complexity? This is how you actually try and achieve this from a supply chain perspective, because you take any component, continually analyze it from a binary perspective without also getting involved in intellectual property issues and source code analysis, actually with other vendors. So you can measure the deltas between components and help measure where your investment is in security. And thank you very much for your time.